Welcome back to another Book Talk with Tracy. This is the second segment where I'm talking about my book, Neighbours. And last time I talked about the various changes it's gone through. It's had various different covers. It's been published by a couple of different people. And so it's gone through some changes, but it is still basically the same story. And I'll just read the back. It says, Lester Tibbett, a former rodeo cowboy from southern Alberta, moves to the city for work and to look out for his willful teenage sister. In the process, he meets a cast of quirky characters, most living right in his own apartment building. With romance, intrigue, humor, and a touch of the unexpected, the twists and turns just keep coming as this first season of Neighbours unfolds. So there are 9 novellas, I guess you could call them, that make up the entire series. This is the most recent cover. And it takes place in Calgary, Alberta, as I just said, starting out with this rodeo cowboy, Lester Tibbett. And, I've got pictures on the back of the characters, so there's Lester right there. And so when he moves, he's a bit, I wouldn't say rough around the edges, but, he's a country boy, and he has to learn to navigate the city ways. And in the process, he ends up falling in love, which was kind of unexpected for him. So the first novella is centered around Lester, and also kind of introduces some of the other characters that we're going to see a little bit later on. And in fact, that episode is called New in the Neighborhood. Well, then in episode 2, which is called Stuck in the Neighborhood, we meet who turns out to be Lester's love interest. Her name is Sherry Chan. And she's a Chinese-Canadian whose parents are still quite traditional. They own a restaurant. However, she and her twin brother Sherman, have gone on to be very successful professionals, as their parents wanted them to be. But there is this tug, this pull between the traditional side of their culture and wanting to be modern people, doing whatever they're doing in a normal modern society, and especially when it comes to choosing a mate. So Sherry has a lot of issues then with her family. She's a professor, and she does happen to teach Lester's younger sister, Patsy. So that's kind of where that connection begins. The third episode is called Sneaking Around the Neighborhood, and that one focuses on Patsy May Tibbett, Lester's younger sister. And she really hates it when people use her full name, because to her that sounds like she's a little country hick or something. She wants to be called Pat. But, like any young woman who's just graduated from high school, she wants to be independent, and she's a little bit miffed that her older brother is so controlling, or what she thinks is controlling. So, of course, she wants to get out there and have some fun. So she meets some new friends at school, and she starts to sneak out a little bit, do a little partying, and the results aren't always that good for her. So that is Sneaking Around the Neighborhood. Now, I will just mention here that when it was republished the first time, the title was changed to include a contemporary Christian romance, which I thought was important, because just the title Neighbours on its own doesn't really give that sense that there is a Christian element. I will say this book is quite mild. It's not overtly Christian, but there are Christian elements, and certainly once we get to the second book, which I'm going to talk about another time, it is the gospel message is a lot more in the forefront. But part of in this one, because it's contemporary, and because they're not all Christians at the beginning or even at the end, there is some things happening in the book that some people think, what? How can that be in a Christian novel? For instance, there's, Patsy, for one, is experimenting with sex, and there's a fair bit of drinking. One of the main locations in the book is a place called the Urban Cowboy, which is a bar in downtown Calgary. It's not a real bar, of course, but I made it up. And a lot of the scenes take place in that location. So, there are things like that, but hopefully it's tasteful, certainly not over the top in my view, and it's all part of the story of how God can use people and move people and redeem people, no matter where you're from and what's happening. So, volume or episode number 4 is actually called Working the Neighborhood. And this one focuses on a couple of women. Mostly it's from the point of view of Tamara Spence, who is a First Nations woman. She has a young son whose name is Matanabe. She lives in the same apartment building. But she and her friend, Carmen Lamont, also run a very successful coffee shop in downtown Calgary called The Brew. And so we get to know her and her son a little bit more, and some of the issues that she has, some of her past has made her a little bit skittish when it comes to relationships and things like that. So that's volume number 4, Working the Neighborhood. And then in episode, sometimes I call them volumes, sometimes I call them episodes. In episode number 5, it's called Back in the Neighborhood. And this is where we meet Sherry Chan's brother, Sherman. So he moves back to Calgary from Toronto, where he has been a successful architect. And, again, there's lots of ties, like all the stories tend to weave together. So he ends up being interested in Carmen Lamont, who is Tamara Spence's business partner at The Brew. Also, he gets involved, of course, with some of the problems happening with his family. And he's also the main architect, or one of his architectural firm was involved in building this new high-rise building where Lester Tibbett, our original character, and his friend end up working on construction. So, moving forward, we have navigating the neighborhood, we have skeletons in the neighborhood, we find out some things about that are happening with some of the characters from their past. We have leaving the neighborhood, where Patsy decides she's had enough and she's going to run away on her own. And then finally, the very last episode, There Goes the Neighborhood, kind of brings it all together. So it's a complex story, but I don't think it's difficult because each individual episode kind of focuses on one main character, and then it builds from there. And then by the end, hopefully, you've got a handle on everybody. So that's kind of how it works out. And I could see it being a great TV series. I don't know how to pitch to Netflix, but it's one of those things that I think would go over well. In any case, I have more to say about this book, so I'm gonna have one last third segment on Neighbours, and I'll be back next time to tell you all about that. In the meantime, why not head over to my website, tracykrause.com, and check everything out. Bye for now.